Chris, you're on the Salespreneur Podcast. How you doing, man?
Nice, doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Uh, I'm super stoked to have you on here. You know, um, I was just thinking about it when I was getting ready for the call, but you were there for me, kind of mentoring me when I first got into tech out of the door-to-door sales arena, and then you've been mentoring me with early stages of real estate stuff, and you've helped a ton of people as a resource on LinkedIn. You've helped people find jobs, and now you're doing the whole Utah Sales Meetup thing. So it's cool to have someone with your perspective and background on
Thanks,
the
man. Yeah,
show. Um, I
yeah.
mean,
I remember the
obviously,
the early days at Workstream when we were working together, and you're always the one to like schedule 7, 8 a.m. meetings for like demos that I had to do. And I'm like, well, I guess I got to build pipeline. I got to close deals, so I better do these demos. But Clay was like notorious for someone on the East Coast like doing a 7 a.m. demo. I'm like, but yeah, it's all that was like 4 years ago, so a lot has changed.
that's so funny that you say that because I still try to book myself for 7 a.m. and 7 a.m. demos with restaurants.
I'm like, I'm
Um,
trying to go to the gym. I'm trying to, have a calm morning routine, and here I am, hopping on with
yeah,
Clay. But
yeah, man. No work-life balance if you're working with me.
no,
Um,
I was glad for, it was a good thing in the end, at the end.
yeah, it's crazy that was 4 years ago though, because we're like literally in the mid-20s right now, which seems bizarre to me because like I feel like
Yeah,
it's still 2020. But
yeah, it's weird to say that for sure. But yeah,
um,
time goes quick.
anyway, dude, I'd love for listeners that haven't met you yet or anything like that, if you could just give me a quick intro and then we can dive into your story.
Yeah, would love to. Yeah, I'm Chris Horton. I am an account executive, and I've been doing tech sales for exactly 7 years, like this week. So, been in
Congrats.
the tech world for a while. I grew up in Lehi, Utah, where like all of a sudden, all this tech buzz started to happen, and tech companies started to work here. And Utah is an interesting place because um, we're pretty close to San Francisco, so we're close to Silicon Valley. Most of the folks here, myself included, they go do like a 2-year service mission that teaches you basically how to do outbound sales. In if you want to summarize that, and so I got home and jumped into tech, and it allowed me to do some other cool things with real estate and businesses and things like that. And now still selling, but also doing a lot on the side as well. So excited to talk a little bit about it and reconnect with you, Clay, for sure.
Yeah, no, and the sales community has grown here a ton. Uh, myself, I'm from Idaho, and so I feel like there's a lot of people that have immigrated here because of the tech community. I mean, in college, I I wanted to move down here from Idaho just because there was so much opportunity, and it's cool that you've had that opportunity to really grow up with that in Lehigh. Because I remember driving through Lehigh 15 years ago, and like there was nothing here, and now
Yeah.
there's so much.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I was talking to someone a few days ago, and they were like, yeah, I live in Austin, Texas, but I actually have a couple rental properties in Lehigh. And I was like, that is something you never would have heard 10, 15, 20 years ago, is somebody investing in like out of state investing in real estate in Lehigh. But it's a great place to be.
mhm. Yeah, Lehigh's been an amazing spot for us for sure. Um, well, obviously here on the Salespreneur Podcast, we love hearing how people got into sales and
Mhm.
how it's empowered them to do stuff on the side. You're very much like me, where you're ADD and like you're doing one thing, but you're also doing a million other things.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear how you got into sales. Like, why of all things, like right after you said you did this 2-year service mission,
Yeah.
why did you get into the sales?
Yeah. I mean, I think like most people that get into sales, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so I got home I was in Brazil. I got home, and my aunt we were out at lunch, and she said, hey, what are you going to do for work? And she was at a tech company, they did medical software, and she did HR, and she said, we're looking for what was called an ADR, account development rep. And she said, it's kind of like a telemarketing, kind of like a call center. Like you're just going to call people and set up appointments for the closers to come in and close the deals. And I was like, all right, well, I don't really have anything else to do. And then she said, oh, and it pays $18 an hour. And I was like, yeah, I'm sold. I don't care what I have to do. If it's $18 an hour, I'll do it. So yeah, fast forward, probably 3 or 4 weeks later, I started as an SDR, and didn't always know that I wanted to do sales. I actually took a short break from sales after being an ADR for a little bit, and then came back because I realized it was just what I wanted, and yeah, now here I am 7 years later.
So wait, no college?
I was going to school. My wife is super academic, you could say. So she's super smart. She was always the 4.0 student, and so she pushed me pretty hard to go to school. And I was going to school up until I got an AE promotion. I still did 2 semesters after I became an AE. So I would work from 6:30 a.m. until 4 p.m. usually. And then I'd busted over to the university. I'd take, I think I was doing 2 or 3 classes a night. And then I'd get home at 9 or 10 p.m. sometimes. And I did that for 2 semesters after I got promoted to account executive. And then after that, I had those 2 semesters. So it's basically a full year as an AE, and did super well. And I was like, I think this is the career path that I want to continue down and pursue. So why would I, keep going to school and studying geography? And I was taking these meteorology classes and stuff. And I was like, why don't I just pour that time into
Meteorology classes. Wait, what was your major? What was your major if you're studying meteorology?
It was just generals, I think. But that's the thing, is I didn't really know, I didn't have a, hey, I want to get this degree in marketing so that I can do marketing. I knew I wanted to do sales, and my university didn't have a sales program or a sales club or anything like that. So, and then I just invested the money and the time that I would have into reading, studying, meeting, sales folks. So sales info.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like once you've been in sales so long, your educational background kind of doesn't matter, because, like you said, you were an AE for, you said it was a year, and that's kind of when you decided to stop going to school, or?
Yeah, I would hop off of demos and run to my car because I was late for class, and sit in an economics class, and it was applicable and it was interesting, but it wasn't it wouldn't help me with my day job, right? Yeah. So, and then now, you fast forward years later, I've never had anybody ask about my college degree, right? So it does get a little bit less relevant.
And you're probably making a lot more than anybody that was in that college class with you.
Yeah. I hope. I think there is a bit, there's some caveats to tech sales. You hear about people making $1 million and things like that, but for the most part, there is kind of a cap when it comes to being a seller versus an entrepreneur. Like an entrepreneur, you can grow your business to no cap. And companies are smart these days, and they try to figure out ways for you not to break their commission structures and things like that. But you can earn a pretty consistently high income compared to most of my friends. It's generally higher. Now, those friends might eventually, as their businesses and things like that grow, they might eclipse what I make generally. But hopefully by that time, I've invested in other things that just, it make my yearly income irrelevant, if that makes sense. Okay.
But let's dig more into that, because you said, and you mentioned it a couple times, where you make great money in sales and you want to push that into other investments or things that can make your life easier so that you don't have to hit it or make as much in sales, essentially. Can you
Hmm.
tell me about how you kind of started investing in other areas?
Yeah, I think sales, like tech sales or general sales, I don't know, like it's a great way to quickly get to like the 200K mark in income. But if you think about it, like you're not going to be able to retire off of, I mean, you can retire off of 200K at like 65, 70 years old, like you save and save and save every year. And early on, I realized like, I don't want to just be, I don't want to retire when I'm 65. I don't want to be an account executive or a sales manager or even a VP of sales when I'm like 50. I want to have more freedom. So when I started getting paid well as an account executive, and by paid well, I don't mean like 200K or, whatever. Like I was getting paid like probably 90K, maybe a little bit more. But my wife and I were living like we were just newlyweds. We didn't have, expenses and whatnot. And I had a high school teacher. So like rewinding way back, I had a high school teacher that said, like the best thing that you can do as a newlywed couple is buy a duplex, rent one side of it, and live in the other side. And like now I understand that's called house hacking, and you can do that. You can keep doing it, but it just stuck in my head. And when we moved into the apartment that we lived in, one day I ran into the landlord and I was like, "Hey, like, looks like you have multiple properties. Can you explain that to me at some point? Like, how did you get them? What was financing like? All of that." And he was a real estate agent, so he was like, "Boom, new client. Like, this is awesome." And he's like, "Yeah, like we'll invite you over one day and we'll explain to you what we did and how you guys can do it. Like, anybody can do what we've done. It's not rocket science. You don't have to have like a rich grandpa or a, huge loan or anything like that." So anyways, I was super, super intrigued. And so he could just kind of explain the house hacking. You buy a house, you rent the basement or the other side of it, or purposefully try to get multi-unit. And then you move to a new house, you do the same thing and keep the old one and kind of go from there. So he helped us find our first duplex, and he said like, "Hey, we'll cut your contract if you buy through me," because he's getting like a 6% commission on it, which is way more than we would have paid him in rent. And so bought that duplex. All the while I'm like a newish account executive. Um, Bought the duplex and it was kind of like a fixer upper. Like the plan was to remodel it once we got in. So we moved in. We didn't unpack our boxes because my grandparents were supposed to go on like another service mission, and we were going to move into their house. And so we didn't unpack the boxes. We were waiting for them to leave. They actually never left because of some like health complications, but we still moved into their basement, lived with them for 6 months. And what I would do, and my wife, like I would go before work at like 6 a.m. and I would work on like parts of the house, like demoing a wall, or I did all the electrical and like I'd work on it. Then at 8:30, I'd shower off real quick and head to the office. And then after work, 5 o'clock comes around, I'd head back to that house and continue on like the demo, or I'd run to the dump and we'd work on it till like 9 or 10 p.m. And looking back, it was like easily the worst 6 months of our marriage, because it was just like she's like doing shiplap in the corner and I'm like running wire through the attic, and we're yelling at each other because she wants to do one thing and I want to do another, and we have to agree on paint color and lighting, and you know but we still talk about this, like we talked about it yesterday. Like we're so glad that we chose the hard route when it came to finding a house and building a little bit of wealth, rather than like what most people do, which is they go and they start to make money at a real job, and then they buy like a starter home, or they buy a townhome or whatever it is. Like nothing against people who buy townhomes, but that duplex literally like launched us into whatever we wanted to do next, because we had so much equity after we finished remodeling. And then all of a sudden the market started to go crazy. And so now we're looking at a house that's worth like triple what I bought it for. And we bought another one. Same thing, rented the basement while we lived there for a couple years. And then we bought another one. Same thing, rented the basement while I lived there, and kind of continued to do that. What my landlord first kind of taught us to do. So that helped me do, other things. It helps me feel more calm at my day job because we no longer have housing expenses like the rents from the basements and the other houses that we've kept. Those all cover our expenses. So it allows me to be a little bit riskier with what I go do now.
Yeah, and actually, I recall a LinkedIn story that was about your first duplex. I think it was something
Yeah.
about how it was your grandma's house. Is
Yeah.
that
So
right?
that
Or
same,
can you shed light on that?
yeah, the same grandparents that we lived with while we were remodeling, uh, they're like, whereabout is this house that you guys are working on? And I'm, it's like, oh, this is the address. And they're like, I think that's about the same block as the house that we lived in while we were going to college in Provo, Utah. And I was like, oh, do you have any pictures of it or anything? Like maybe we know the house. Maybe it's in, maybe we've driven past it. And so they pull out these pictures from like 1968 or 69 or something like that. Uh, and maybe even earlier than that. It was in the 60s. And I'm like,
Wow.
that's our house. Like pictures of my grandma as a 23-year-old lady standing in front of the house that we're like tearing the exterior off of. And anyways, they knew the owners at the time. The owners bought it in 1938 for $650. My grandparents, 30 years after that, when they moved in, paid, I want to say like $75 for rent. And then we were paying, like $2,200 for our mortgage on it. So anyways, yeah, really cool story. Like, I guess my mom knew the owners. They called them Grandpa and Grandma Allred. Like, it's a really cool family story. And now we own the duplex, and it's like a family heirloom almost. I want to pass it down to my daughter.
That's so cool. So wait, how old were you when you bought that place too?
Um, I was 23.
Okay, so
Um,
kind of like full circle.
yeah, yeah, good point. Yeah, I was about the same age my grandma was when she grandma and grandpa when they lived there. Yeah, yeah, I think everyone was looking at me and they were like, are you sure you want to do that? Like, are you sure you want to buy a house? Like, is this sales job not like sketchy? Like, what if you get fired, or what if the company goes out of business in 2 months, right? Like, you're stuck with all this stuff. But like, man, it was like it was a rush to just like look at all of those folks that were doubting you, or like, you know, didn't believe in whatever you were doing or didn't understand it, and just keep pursuing it. And, you know, 7, 8 years later, the best decision we ever made. So
Well, it's crazy too, Chris, because people judge you on both sides of it, right? Because I've had family both times we bought property, be like, "Are you sure you want to do this right now?" And then also, I'm sure it's easy for people to look at you now and be like, "Oh, well, Chris, like you kind of just got lucky with the market.
yeah,
Like, I mean, you bought at a time that was really low, and like now you have all this equity, and like you're kind of just lucky." But in my personal opinion, I think that you took action, and so like it could have gone the other way. I mean,
yeah,
it could have gone down and you could have lost everything. And so
yeah,
there's always two sides of the coin.
yeah.
Um,
I posted about that not too long ago. Just like, everyone doubts you until you've done it, and then everyone says you were lucky, right? So like,
mhm.
I don't know. I mean, a big part of life, sure, is being lucky and being in the right place at the right time. And I think there's a lot of luck involved with what we did, but there's a lot of what we did that I'd still recommend people do today. So it's like,
Mhm.
just taking action, like you said, is huge.
Well, we've had that conversation before uh, about luck, where
Hmm.
yeah, there's a lot of luck involved with everything, but you just want to like find those opportunities where luck is involved. And
Hmm.
there's even another concept I've heard other people talk about on podcasts. It's called asymmetric risk,
Mm.
where typical risk, like it's a 50-50, right? But asymmetric risk means that there's over a 50% chance that it actually does well. So instead of saying there's a 50% chance it loses, there's
Mm.
actually maybe like a 20 or a 15% chance. And
Yeah.
so I've kind of come enthralled with that idea recently of
Mm-hmm.
filling your life with asymmetric risk, like you did with real estate, where
Yeah.
you bought something that you could afford, and then you've taken the upside, which is
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. It was
And then you've,
actually Blake Harbor and I were literally just talking about that today. Like, businesses are risky and there's businesses involved with it all. But if you can do, I don't know if you want to say it's like filling in like a true need, like that's a part of it. But like the story that I could best use to kind of describe that is my grandpa had a metal shop where they made parts for like guns and ski lifts and blenders and stuff like that. And at the like before he started that, he was teaching at BYU, like a metals class. And a friend of his was like, I'm starting a business where we make blenders and I need metal parts. Like, can you fabricate some for me? And it wasn't him sitting down and saying, I want to start a metal shop. I want to fabricate parts and be a manufacturer or anything. It was like there was this need, a friend of his that needed something and would pay a lot for it. And he just filled that need with the knowledge and the skills that he had. And that, you know, that he ended up, it was Blend Tech that he was making parts for, and they blew up. And so his company blew up, and he ended up getting other huge accounts and things like that. But, you know, it was just, it was risky, but he wasn't risking it all on some stupid idea, if that makes sense. Like he had that asymmetrical risk, like you mentioned.
yeah, and I think a lot of that comes down or happens when you are developing a skill and you become really good at it, and
Mm-hmm.
then you're able to monetize it outside of your W-2. So your grandpa was doing something where he was teaching at a university, which is essentially a
Mm-hmm.
W-2, and then all of a sudden, like the public market saw need of that and said, "Hey, we'll just pay you to do that on your own because you're so good at it."
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, you and I have both seen plenty of experiences that we could talk about that. But I think you have another interesting experience where you've found ways to offset your lifestyle through investments. I know you've done some stuff like in the van rental space.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, that's how I think about entrepreneurship and finances is like you can offset anything you have or want through business, right? Like I can offset my housing costs through rentals. You have to own a home. Well, you kind of do. You should own a home. Why not
Yeah.
like own multiple homes and those multiple homes pay for your home? So, anyways, uh, my family's super into rock climbing. I love climbing. I love like going around Utah, going around the West Coast and going to climbing spots and things. And my wife grew up in the Tetons and going there. And anyways, we like to travel and all that. And so, anyways, in 2020, like camper vans blew up, and same thing. We were like, we really want a camper van, but they're like six figures, and we could never justify just having like a $90,000 thing sitting in our driveway besides the 4 weeks that we go on our van trips. And so I heard about on like TikTok or YouTube or somewhere, like a friend of a friend that was doing van rentals where he would buy these vans, like a Sprinter or a ProMaster, and he'd buy the van, and didn't even have a whole lot of intention of using them, but he'd buy vans and then he'd rent them. There's a few different apps that you can rent them on, and they cover your insurance. They cover like roadside assistance for you so that you as the owner, it's basically Airbnb for vans or RVs or whatever you have. So anyways, we bought the van, the first one, and I kind of built that one out myself. We threw it up, started renting it, and I was like a little bit nervous about the like pretty decent chunk of money we had just spent on it. But then all of a sudden, like a day or two after posting it on Outdoorsy, we had like a $2,000 5-night rental or 6-night rental or something like that. And it covered, the cost of the van for like 3.5 months, and like the hypothetical cost. So for me, it was like, okay, like let's dig more into this. And every van trip that we wanted to do, like if we wanted to go on the week of the July 4th, if we wanted to go to Wyoming or Idaho or whatever, we would just block it out, and we had to plan around it anyways. And other than that, it was rented, and it was rented quite a bit. So we ended up making a ton of money overall on the van. We got another one. We did the same thing. And, it never took me more than 5 hours a week, if that, to kind of manage everything. Because I had it all hands free. Like I had a lock box where the key would get dropped, and then I would put the key in it for people to pick up, and YouTube videos explaining how to use all the different stuff in the van. So like it was fully automated and hands free. I rarely even met the renters. And then we never had a single like issue. No one ever broke anything. No one ever did anything. Like these people were going on like, bucket list trips to the national parks in Utah. So they didn't want to ruin their experience and trash a van. And granted, it was a pretty nice van. So like they saved up their money and planned and everything. So anyways, it was an awesome experience. And it's super cool on telling me like, hey, you may not make $1 million, but you can for sure own this van and multiple vans and build like a small business off of it with very, very little input from your end.
Yeah, and even that example there is just like an example of you taking advantage of timing, right? Like you took advantage of real estate at a time where you didn't know if it was good, but like you took a shot on it and it worked out, and then you find this camper van, you just test it out and it works. I'm sure you've had a lot of experiences where it doesn't work out, but at least you're out there trying things when other people are sitting at the sidelines. Because you and I are both like 28, 29 years old, and we have friends that are the same age that just haven't done anything.
Yeah.
And so they're still at zero.
Now that type of thing seems so easy, if that makes sense. Like I've done those things and I've taken those risks. So doing something like that again is a no-brainer, right? Because I'm not worried about it working or not. Like, and the crazy thing is, in 2023, the van still rented like crazy. Like it was still 2 years after COVID, and it was renting almost every weekend. So, but yeah, now like those big risky moves just feel simple as long as you kind of follow the right tactics.
Yeah. Well, even like an interesting spin on the conversation we're having right now, you're doing a lot of these entrepreneurial things on the side, and obviously you have a W-2. You've done really well at sales, which is exciting. But I also know there's this trend of people saying like, hey, like I want to get out of my W-2 or whatever. I know you have a contrarian view on that. And you actually posted about it a couple weeks ago. You said something that I thought was funny. You said, people these days will do anything to make money besides their job. And I'm curious if you could kind of tie that in with your view on entrepreneurship and sales.
Yeah. I think a big thing that I live by is the way you do one thing is the way you do everything, in my opinion. And so if you're like, half effort in your sales job, like you're probably going to be half effort in your business. And so like, I just see a lot of people trying to dodge work. And, I think what people don't realize is like, even as an entrepreneur, even as a solopreneur or whatever it is, like there's so much work involved. Granted, it's different type of work. I mentioned like I was with Blake Harbor today. He had me move a couple vending machines. Blake was our VP of sales. He's like he was in tech for 10 years. He was a VP level, like leading, kind of high stakes meetings and things like that, wearing white collar every day. And now he recruits me to move 2 vending machines with him on a Friday afternoon. And that was like the hardest thing I've done all week, was moving those vending machines. And Blake's doing it, almost every day. So like, anyways, it's a different type of business, different type of work. But I think if Blake hadn't already been working hard and killing it in like what he did as a W-2, he probably wouldn't be doing very well as an entrepreneur either. So anyways, I think there are ways to like work not less, but differently in more satisfying ways. But dodging work is like just never really the answer, in my opinion. I think it'll come back to bite you pretty hard.
Yeah, well, we're also in an interesting time. It has been hard for so many of us in sales because we've had tons of layoffs. Quotas have been harder to hit than ever. You've had to find different ways to find meaning at work, and so sometimes like
Yeah.
the most natural path is just to be like, well, I want to give up on my job and just go try and start a business. But like people don't realize that even though sales is hard, like starting a business is way harder,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you don't have that natural path. Kind of like you said you're with your grandpa, like somebody recruited him to go do that metal thing. It's like sometimes those opportunities just come to you at the right time. And
Yeah.
so trying to force it just because you're pissed off at your job is
Yeah.
not always the best thing.
I agree. I hear a lot
Um,
of people say like working in W-2 all it makes me want to do is quit that W-2. And to me, it's like all your entrepreneurial efforts are going to want you to do, are going to make you want to go get a W-2 where things are set up for you, like, so anyways,
yeah,
I
well,
think it's important to take it all with a grain of salt, like not read too deeply into like what I say or what some, entrepreneur. I think we look at a lot of these people that have made it as entrepreneurs, like you don't see the early days of when they were losing 60K a month and like, like, and things were tough. So anyways, yeah, just understanding like what actually went into all of that success.
yeah, no, it's crazy. In fact, I was just talking to somebody that's going to be on the podcast in a couple weeks who started a business or he bought one and then it
Mm-hmm.
ended up failing. And I just remember him telling me about how much of a blessing it is now, like going back to get a W-2 because he's like, man, the anxiety and like the sleepless nights behind this business failing was so intense that like the
Yeah.
thought of just waking up and like having a salary that's gonna hit my bank account every month is like unreal. So I
Yeah.
think that we don't see that side of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I have a friend, same thing. Aaron Wilkinson, you're friends with him as well. Like he bought a like trophy and t-shirt,
mhm.
like embroidering and screen printing. He bought a business from his dad after doing corporate accounting, and same thing. Now he's an account executive at a publicly traded company, and he just invests all of the money he makes. And he's like, it's so awesome because I just have to do what they tell me to do, and I make this money, and I can invest it, and like I don't have to wonder if my employees are going to starve this month. So yeah, definitely a
Yeah,
lot of value in it. Now, none of this should say people shouldn't start businesses. I just think that you have to have the right mindset around it all.
oh for sure. Um, Chris, look, with the last couple minutes we have left, I know that you just barely took over the Utah Sales Meetup thing on LinkedIn, which I think is super dope. Uh,
Thanks, man.
I'm super curious, how like how you took it over. Maybe if you could tell us kind of like what's going on over there.
Yeah, so it's called Utah Sales Meetup on LinkedIn. We have a Slack group as well where it's a little bit more active than the actual LinkedIn, just because it's like chatter. Um, but Utah Sales Meetup was started by Junior Larte and a few other people at a company called Pickle, which isn't quite around anymore, but they started it. They did a few really cool events, had some great speakers, built the group up to a few hundred members. And then Junior actually moved to Virginia, and Pickle kind of, I don't know what the word would be. Pickle's done. So anyways, it was just sitting there forever. And in November, about 2 months ago, I reached out to Junior and I was like, hey, you're in Virginia. I'm here in Utah. I love Utah. I love the people here. I want to network as much as possible. Can I take the group over from you and just try to, make something of it? And he's like, oh, I think I'm going to keep it, try and, work it out or whatever. And then fast forward 2 months to like 3 weeks ago, he texted me one morning and he just said, hey, I want to hand over the Utah Sales Group Sales Meetup to you completely. Do you want that? And I said, totally, I do. And anyways, gave me all the rights and everything. And yeah, I don't want it to be too much where it like takes up anybody's life or time more than it should, including my own. But what I want it to be is a strong community where if you're looking for advice or relationships or someone to go to lunch with or a new job, like that's your first place that you go if you're here in Utah. Utah they have Silicon Slopes, which has turned into like this huge conference every year. We have, everyone has their own little company that they're at and their posse within those companies. But the hard part about a network is you go to a company and you work there for 5 years, you build your friendships there and your relationships. You go to another company, you're there for a few years, you build your friendships and your relationships. And it takes 10 years to build a decent network within those companies. So what I want to do is I want to just fast forward that for anybody that wants it. If you want to build a strong network in 6 months, then you can build a network of hundreds of people in Utah that can help you get jobs, that can help you level up your skills without you having to jump from company to company and, spend all those years building that network.
Yeah, no, I mean, we even had an example because I went to your micro meetup just for like lunch yesterday, and we had a brand new SDR at a company here in Lehigh, and he moved here from out of state, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden he got access to you, me, a couple other really senior salespeople in the
Yeah.
valley, and he's just a junior SDR. So
Yep.
it's cool to see even small stuff like that taking off.
Yeah.
You know, you've
And
been
that's
in the
just
tech community for 7 years, so
the conversations that we were all having probably didn't make a ton of sense because he's like 3 days into an SDR role. But like that alone, I think levels up somebody pretty quickly. Like just having those relationships, he can hit me up, you, Blake, like he can hit any of the folks that were at that lunch, and we'll connect him with people that we know, with jobs that are open, like whatever he needs, he kind of has that instantly now. So yeah, those types of things, just kind of networking lunches. We have an event on January 24th at 4:00 at the Kiln building where we've got a panel of 3 super senior sales leaders that are going to talk about how to build pipeline, and we're going to have swag, and it's going to be awesome. So those sorts of things, like I said, I don't want it to be something that like takes up your day and your week. I just want it to be something that is there, when people want it and need it.
yeah. No, and I love that you guys are doing it at 4 p.m. because I have a hard time skipping lunch demos to go to a networking event. It's like, nah, dude, I'd rather make a couple $100 closing a deal than going to this. But
Yeah.
4 o'clock on a Thursday is a great time. Are you guys always going to be having like senior sales leaders, or what's the intent of those meetups?
No, I want to be as like, just keep it as interesting as possible. So I think it would be really cool to hear from like the top SDRs or the top, AEs, or like an enterprise rep talking to an SMB rep, or like
Hmm.
just like as creative as we can make it. There's a few cool companies in here like Sales Dojo.
Oh, for sure.
Like I was talking with him the other day and he was like, we should have like a cold call like competition, like best elevator pitch wins, or like. So anyways, who knows, what it all evolves into, but I think I want to like keep it interesting instead of just like, oh, here's this VP that's just going to tell you to like chase down those deals. Like that's great, and I do think there's going to be a ton of value, but it's not going to be that every single month. It's going to be very very holistic of like every different part of the revenue org as well.
That's great. Yeah, something for beginner people that are in the trenches every single
Yeah,
day, which I feel like we need. If I was just moving here all over again, starting over, I feel like that would be a great community to be a part of. So,
hopefully.
um,
Yeah, thanks for letting me plug that.
Yeah, man. And thanks for coming on the podcast. I think, you have such a cool story of being able to do this while you're in your sales job, and the reasons why you're doing it. You've done it at a really young age, and hopefully a lot of people can find value in this story. I know that I have. So
Thanks, man.
thanks for being on the podcast, Chris, and we'll catch you later.
Appreciate it, Clay. Thanks.